Thanks for coming out tonight, of course, again. My name is Matthew Sommer. I'm with Brolik as well. I'm Chief Strategy Officer. So we're so glad that you guys all joined us tonight. What we've heard about so far, we've heard from Chop and Jaguar Land Rover really talking about how they've really brought technology and innovation into focus, in their businesses and what they're doing to try and sort of look to the future in that capacity. So what we thought would be interesting is that now that we've seen it from the brands or businesses' perspectives a little bit here, could we look at this same question or picture from the agency side, from the guys and businesses, guys and girls, and businesses that really help them to, from an outside perspective, help them to implement these new technologies and to really focus on innovation. So to do so, we've brought these fine gentlemen sitting next to me here, all from digital agencies, all who have helped and led countless hundreds of client projects, really helping other businesses implement this kind of technology and push forward in innovation with their own businesses. So sitting next to me, we have Chris Bai here, founder of Tonic Design, or a founder of Tonic Design, also now founder of Bai Design as well. On the other couch here, we have Drew Thomas, founder and Chief Technology Officer over at Brolik. We have Ryan Findley, founder and principal at Neomind Labs. And Chris Cera, CEO of Arcweb Technologies and co-founder of Philly Startup Leaders, who have an event tonight as well.
Right now.
Right now. Well, we better hurry then, so you can get there. So we just want to discuss from the agency perspective, how these guys and how these businesses are really helping other businesses to take the lead. So my first question to open up to you guys, what can an organization do to set the stage and point themselves in the right direction to transition to a more technology and innovation-oriented business? Anybody, jump in.
Is this on? Yeah. So I think the first thing is mindset, and it's really important. And sometimes companies who aren't focused on technology or who are like a little older and maybe set in their ways, they don't really realize that it's all about mindset. And it's about understanding what it really takes to maybe start an incubator or start an internal technical division, whatever the case. Understanding what that really means is so important. And so a lot of times people may not understand what that really means or what it really takes. And they kind of try or they kind of throw some resources at it, but not enough to do what it takes and to really make it happen. So I would actually say it's kind of like an education component, something like that.
I'm going to add to that. Sounds good? Yeah. So I heard a story, maybe it's an urban legend, but it sounded true, sounded like a good idea. Maybe someone here can confirm or deny. But I heard that Comcast Interactive Media was started in a separate building away from Comcast on purpose so that they could have a new culture that was more about going fast and being agile. And then once they had established their culture and sort of had their own identity, they were able to put it back with the rest of the company and let them defend themselves.
I would add that if you're trying to get the type of, the culture of technology and innovation, one method is to just import it. So to bring in people that have done it in other companies, and sometimes people will just decide to work with an agency, and it can be a challenge sometimes that the people on the other side don't have anyone behind them that has worked with a technology company or an innovation company. And I've been in situations with $10 million companies, so they're not huge companies, but they're not that small either, where we are essentially reporting to the CEO who has no time to talk to us and no time to really understand what we're trying to build. So a lot of times I think there needs to be some infrastructure too before an agency is brought in, and that can involve importing the right people first.
Definitely hire consultants.
I guess I offer kind of a unique or fresh perspective on this because, as you said, I used to run Tonic Design, and I stepped away from that to kind of pursue more product and innovation projects and to build my own products and also work with startups and what you've even heard earlier with Jaguar and also with Chop is, they're outsourcing innovation. There's these walls of bureaucracy that sort of they can't get these things sort of built. So if you were to ask me if I'm in the agency business or technology business, I would say I'm not in either one of those things. I'm in the human business. So I'm very much into sort of human-centered design. For me, it's all about you don't build product from the product down, you build it from the user up. And if you don't understand the motivations and actually what makes your users tick, you can't build product for them. So you can make the most beautiful product, you get the best technology behind it, but if it doesn't drive business and it doesn't add value to the end user, it's useless. So I mean, that's sort of what drives me. And I love to sort of consult and work with strategic partners and find the right clients that are not only the type of projects that I want to work on, but also a good fit from a values perspective as well. Because when you're looking for clients, you don't always just want to just drive revenue per se. Like you actually, it's really critical that you interview them as much as they interview you. Because again, it's about bringing that value and utility to the product and drive their business forward.
So in all of these projects that you've launched into with various clients, businesses of all sizes, what do you find is the biggest hurdle that they face, or maybe more simply, what is most likely to bring the whole initiative crashing down?
Red tape, corporate red tape, the classic corporate red tape. I mean, it's always there, no matter what. Even in like a very forward-thinking organization, there's some form of, I guess, like, there's other interests. There's many interests that go into a business, so that always has the potential to bring something down.
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing that drives them down is not knowing what problem they're solving. A lot of people go right into solutions mode, and if you get into sort of design thinking and sort of the human-centered movement, you need to start there. If you start with a solution, you're kind of, in human-centered design, you're really looking for that unmet need in the marketplace. You need to know what you don't know and be okay with what you don't know. And a lot of companies are afraid to kind of sort of take that open terrain and kind of go that route. So it's really understanding what problem you're solving, what are the holes in the market that you're looking into, competitive landscape, value prop, all that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, like again, if you want to be a great strategic partner with the clients that you're working with, you're driving business value for them. And if you're not, then it's not a great partnership.
I guess I agree. It's sort of like Chris described a minute ago, when the people that have to sign off on what you're building aren't really understanding the approach or the problem, what it is you're building, because they're not invested or they don't have time or any other reason.
A lot of times the organization as a whole isn't aligned with the initiative that we're being contracted or asked to solve. And so I've had situations where the customer, the end user that's ultimately contracting us, is telling us we need to start on let's say this Friday, and they haven't signed our paperwork yet. And so they're screaming, well, who's showing up Friday? When are they going to be there? It's 11 o'clock. I need people in Virginia, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you still haven't signed our paperwork yet. And like, we've actually kicked off projects with, Fortune 100 companies, and then never actually got our paperwork signed, and ended up walking away like, all right, well, this was a huge fat failure. So the organization as a whole needs to be aligned. Sometimes I think it comes in the form of not understanding what the problem is, so the organization isn't aligned. So I totally agree with that. But a lot of times, like when you're trying to outsource work, the organization has to know how to outsource work intelligently. I think a lot of the bigger companies that we work with that have like a head of innovation, for instance, which a lot of times, in some cases, is a chief innovation officer, is like a big title now at a lot of companies. And what they have a lot of times is actually autonomy to buy things, and they don't have to go through the typical procurement process of the whole organization. And so that allows them to get things done really quickly, make their own mistakes, and that allows things to move a lot quicker. So sometimes that's also sort of this like escape channel from the organization, which kind of gets back to what you were saying about just being in a different building and having that be successful. It doesn't have to be that siloed though. But anyway, alignment was my point.
Sure. When we discussed this question or topic on a call, we had a conference call a few days ago to run through these questions. one thing that kept coming up was RFPs. And I think almost everybody up here said, I generally stay away from that. Tell me about that. Why?
So my favorite experience is when someone comes and they're like, hey, we have 2 RFPs. Someone tells me in my buying department that I need to get 3 before I can buy anything, and I just need you guys to bid on this. And then it's funny because a lot of times we look at it and you're like, you're totally building the wrong thing. You don't understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And I don't even want to bid on this. But anyway, that happens all the time. But in general, you know, a lot of times RFPs, in my experience, the buyer's already kind of been identified. So that for that person that's like, I just need 1 more because my purchasing department says that I need 3. You know, that's sort of like, you know, being used and abused to some extent. So a lot of times I feel like we win most competitive processes that we run. However, when we're in an RFP, we actually usually lose for some reason. And I feel like there's a lot more to that process than just sort of like the competitive nature of it. There's like all sorts of politics in it. So like another example I'll give is, you know, like a lot of the public companies or civic organizations, government organizations have bids that they post, and literally sometimes I've responded to those that like the Chamber of Commerce has, like, hey, you just posted this, you know, project or whatever, and then they'll be like, oh, you know, we already closed the period. And it's like, wait a minute, this is open 5 days. How have you closed anything? But anyway, I've not had a good experience with RFPs, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, I agree. Every time we've looked at an RFP, it almost always looks like they've already identified the solution. The budget that if they give a budget, it's usually fit to some off-the-shelf solution that they want to buy. And we've also heard stories and seen the other side of that, where the buyer is sharing proposals with their favorite vendor so that it can be the best proposal. So if you don't have, I think Chris, you might have mentioned a book called.
Yeah. There's a book called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. I don't know if anybody's ever read that book. If you're in the space, I highly suggest it. But in a couple of sentences, basically talks about when you have deep expertise in a particular arena, people will seek you out for that expertise. If you're an everything agency, let's say, and you take everything under the sun, you now compete against everybody under the sun, right? So if your expertise is big data, or it might be something in sort of patient engagement or something around that regards, you want people coming to you because you're providing sort of the best-in-class solutions for that. That has been sort of something that I've sort of lived by for a long time, and I found that to be true. And the other thing, you know, to kind of just piggyback off the question a little bit, I don't do RFPs. One of the reasons is, I actually read a good quote from David Ogilvy yesterday, and he said, I look at new business like I'm on the hunt, right? And I think when you're in the RFP business, you're reacting to what comes your way. You become the company that just kind of happens to fall into your lap. When you're proactive and you go after the type of work that you want and the type of value alignment that you're about and your team's about, you're going to make your employees happier. You're going to find the right type of clients, and you're going to be able to walk in the door and sort of consult with clients on a level where it opens up opportunities that there isn't any other competition with, right? So, and if you can come in and sort of consult with a client and start providing value like that minute, you know, that's I've had multiple conversations with people recently too, like where, you know, what does an RFP response even look like? You know, does somebody want to read through a 20-page response? Or do they just kind of skip all the way through it and go, what's it cost and what's it do? You know, and that's kind of what they do to start with. So like if you can get things down to a 1-page response, or if you're providing value to somebody immediately, you want to walk away from that meeting saying, okay, let's work together. Let's find new ways. There's new ways to kind of build and kind of set expectations with clients instead of trying to go after the big giant, you know, $1 million engagements. Finding sort of those smaller engagements where you're able to kind of sell teams and kind of turn things on and off as they go. But again, it's about providing that value and that sort of consistent exchange. So yeah, RFPs, no go. If you didn't read Win Without Pitching Manifesto, very, very good book if you're in the agency space.
Well, yeah, and they talk a lot about establishing a relationship, understanding the problem, and they call it getting the inside track.
Yep.
And I was just, to close my point, was just I think when you submit to an RFP, a lot of times, Chris's point that he loses more RFP jobs than others, it's because usually there's an expert that helped them write the RFP, and that's the person that has the inside track, and that's the person who's going to get the job.
Yeah, to that point, I think until recently, the only RFPs that we ever won were ones that we helped write. I think that's pretty true, right? Yeah, until very recently. So
Cool, huh?
to that point.
How did you pull that off?
This guy over here.
Okay, there you go.
He's tricky. So, so if you don't suggest approaching a project with an RFP to all of the CMOs and CTOs in our audience, how would you suggest that they go out and find an agency that they want to work with to find the solution for the projects or ideas that they have in mind?
Are you saying, how would you suggest to them?
No, to them, yeah. How would you guys suggest if you
When you're looking for?
Right.
Okay. I mean, one of the interesting things about the innovation space right now that I think is fascinating, people think about startups and everything that's happening right now and all the dollars that are out there. 10% of that money is really being funneled by VC community. 90% is being actually funneled in by the big corporations. So, and Jaguar, and like I said, you can see that happening. I've been working with some clients in the Midwest that are doing the exact same thing because sort of that bureaucracy and sort of that closed door is hard to get through. To find the right people and that right talent, that's tricky. I think the best people you'll find will be coming to you, and they'll be sort of consulting on that level. They'll open doors. They might have innovative products that sort of spark your interest, those kind of things. And creating those incubators that you guys are doing, I think is brilliant because that's how you're really going to attract the people that want to come work for you. Like Jeff was talking about how he has a hard time finding the right people. But like in his case, I say the same thing, like people want a purpose, they don't want a job. So, when you have sort of a purpose that's around something that really aligns to what those people want to do, you'll be sort of a homing beacon for them, and I think that's really what attracts them. So finding ways to incentivize and entice them to really, come your way because, again, talent is a big part of your intellectual property at the end of the day.
I'll add a couple things. So in general, I don't think there's anything wrong with a company saying this is what we want to see in a proposal. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think, I would like people to tell me what should be in a proposal. I just think there's a lot of RFPs where literally the RFP itself is like 5 or 10 pages, and it's, how many employees do you have? Where are most of them located? Like it's a lot of, paperwork, and so you have to appreciate that if it takes my salesperson 40 hours to just respond to your one RFP, and our chances of winning it are like 10%, and this is only like a $50,000 project, how is that sustainable at all for anyone? So it just has to be something that minimizes the amount of time, because then you're going to eliminate a lot of the really good proactive firms, because they're just not going to essentially spend a lot of time on something that doesn't look like they have a good chance of winning.
I was just going to add, it seems to be a good option, just reach out to your network. Like even if you don't have somebody in your network that is the expert, they might know the expert. So I had someone once call me that I went to high school with and say, are you still into computers? I think we have something, that might need a computer type solution. And I've, sent them to the right person. Last week, someone a longtime friend and a business colleague called me with this problem that I'm not sure if I can help with, but it seemed like it was more in Jason's space, so I sent it over to him. And it's, I think consulting is any kind of consulting, whether it's with a lawyer or with an agency for digital design stuff, is you're necessarily dealing with something that you're not an expert in and they are. So a little bit of trust goes a long way in a better outcome.
I think also kind of related to that is that there's so much of a focus on content marketing and personal brands and people getting out there that actually you can even go beyond your personal network and just read some articles about what you're trying to do, learn some things, and people pop out and companies pop out. Even if they're not the right companies, you talk to them, they recommend someone else, that kind of thing. And all of it, what it boils down to is a more kind of modern process than an RFP, which is sort of what we're getting at with this whole thing is that, things are changing, times are changing, and it's moving from that RFP into something more modern.
Okay, so as I'm approaching a project with you guys, I'm the client. Tell me how those first couple of conversations would go. Tell me what the first most important topics that you would discuss when sort of onboarding or approaching a new project. What would you ask me? How would that conversation go?
What led you to me, and what problem are you trying to solve? Who's it for? Why? What else have you considered? What else has failed? What has come before? Things like that, and then listen, let them talk.
Yeah, I think you want to get to the like, how valuable is this to your organization? I mean, that's really something you really need to find out, because if it's just something they're going to throw out to a bunch of random agencies and they're just trying to find the cheapest bidder, that's probably not a really valuable thing for them to solve. But if you can get to the core of the conversation and find out that, like, yeah, there really is a tremendous amount of value to this for us, then again, obviously the problem that you're looking to solve, and sort of how do you kind of go from there from it. I mean, those are the big things. I mean, budgetary restraints and all of that is part of trying to figure out like what you're working with. But you know, when you're working in a innovation space, you know, one of my goals is to I want to know what a client's budget is. You know, it's not because I'm trying to maximize how many dollars I can make. It's because I want to maximize how much value I can get for those dollars. And like, if you're going to work in a lean, iterative fashion, because it's all, you know, it's all business assumptions, and how do I validate and test that hypothesis, or disprove that hypothesis in the quickest way possible. So, you know, if I know I have $1 million in a 2-year runway, well, I'm going to have a different sort of tact and approach to that project. If I know they have $50,000 and I know it's incredibly critical to them, to the success of that business, here's what I would recommend that you do with those dollars, so we can actually get you traction, so you can get the next either round of funding, or, you know, if you're inside a bigger organization, how do we get it so you can get it up the food chain, so that you can get more budget released. So it's that nonstop give and take of you know, that communication, that strategic alignment, and that partnership, because you want to be, you know, one of the things I learned in the agency space, working with some pretty large companies, when you come through the door as sort of a commodity, you're always seen as a commodity. And if you come through the door and you start having conversations with the C-level guys right off the bat, and they can see that you're aligned with their core mission and their values, and they can see the value that you add, then you can get access to a much larger pool of the project itself. So you got to be careful about how you come through the door and how you're seen, because once you come through in a particular light, it's hard to get out of that. So.
In a first meeting, there's a few roles and objectives that I play, and you know, on one hand, it's sort of like a strategist role and a team member, and just try to be helpful. You know, how can I help these folks get to the next level? And then on the other hand is, you know, trying to help business development for our own company. You know, we have some of our own objectives too. So I'm definitely trying to assess what is the pain being experienced by the company, which is what, you know, Chris was getting at, to, or said differently but similar, such that we can realize, you know, how big of a priority is it for this organization? If there's a lot of pain, and it's really critical, you know, a lot of things that are compliance oriented is oftentimes an immense amount of pain that has to be solved, because it's a regulatory thing and it has to be solved immediately, versus something that's like, yeah, I think it can be more efficient for our workers, but we're not really sure how efficiency impacts the bottom line, and you know, I'm not even sure that I care about bottom line personally. You know, that's a different set of priorities, and I feel like a lot of times people want us to revamp a design, but it's like they feel like they need to redo their design, but they actually don't really know what or why or anything else. And so, you know, that to me says, all right, not a lot of pain, so that means it's not going to be a priority for them. And so, you know, I'm not going to prioritize this really high on my list, most likely, because it's not a priority for them either. So there's the pain, and then budget timeline is important. The timeline sometimes can be gotten from the pain, but not always. And then budget, for all the reasons Chris said, is important. And if I can get all of that in a first call, then I feel like I've gotten a lot. And then I was a software developer, software architect for many years. I'm try in my mind to make sure, like, all right, is this person telling me something that sounds like it's going to be $3 million of work, or is this actually something that's going to be $300,000, which they told me? And so in the first call, I'm trying to be helpful in that regard too, to say, look, I think you're totally hacking in the wrong forest with, you know, the problem you're trying to solve and the budget that you have, because this is a much bigger problem or a much smaller problem. So in that first hour, I'm, you know, hopeful that I'm helpful as a strategist and everything else, but also get what, you know, our agency needs to move our business development forward as well.
Okay. So following this panel, we're going to hear from Chris Hunter from Urban, and he's going to speak about sort of the process of them moving so much of this technological backbone and infrastructure and marketing and all this kind of stuff in-house. So acknowledging that there might be some bias up here on stage, when do you think that it makes sense for a business to try and tackle this type of project themselves, in-house, build a team to do it themselves? And when does it make more sense for them to seek outside help, a consultant or an agency such as yourselves?
I really love the idea of kind of that collaboration. So kind of like a mix, because you go either extreme, you could hire an agency and they, you know, aren't as involved in the business. You could go all in-house and they might not have certain outside experiences. And it's actually sort of hard to find, but I love the idea of mixing the two, or maybe consulting, or maybe having some people do some tests in-house and getting some consultants, you know, some hybrid model to figure out what each business needs, because each business is going to be different. Every business has different in-house people already, and the ability to hire different in-house people, you know, so that could look very different depending on the business. And the only way to really know is to take that step a little bit. And so, like, it just kind of makes sense that if you get everyone involved, you get a little bit outside, a little bit of inside, it's much better for the long run.
It's so hard to know as an outsider what's going to work necessarily inside. I mean, as an outsider, you don't have any idea what the operating history of the company is from an innovation, a technology, cultural perspective. And a lot of times, the culture that they currently have wouldn't support the type of work that they want to do. And it's hard to assess that as an outsider, although there's certainly signals that, you know, you can pick up, but you can't be 100% certain, which is in the first question that you had asked, I, you know, sort of mentioned the people. You know, I definitely want to make sure that I'm working with someone on the other side that really understands what we do, the value that we provide, and is a good team player. You know, the situation where we literally, our account calls are with the CEO of a company is oftentimes not the best scenario, because that person isn't the right, like, a product manager for us for launching a new product in a new market, et cetera, is oftentimes one of the best people for us to work with, because they're on the business side, they're inside, so they don't have to we don't have to question their motives. Their executives don't question their motives, and so I certainly prefer not to do everything sort of entirely outsourced. But anyway, it's hard to assess it as an outsider, and I think many companies can be successful doing this internally, but I've seen it go really wrong, where literally, you know, entire teams were fired, you know, abruptly because things failed. And a lot of times that'll happen with a pure engineering culture that someone's trying to build in, like, a pure sales and marketing culture. You know, a bunch of engineers aren't going to want to work in a boiler room. I've been there. It's not cool.
I think it can depend on what they're building. Is it a new division of a company that's going to be around for a while, or is it a product that's really a one-time project that's going to end? I've heard developers complain that their last 3 jobs have been a series of projects, really, where the employer wanted to own the talent, but really the project was done after 6 months or a year, and the job was sort of to babysit this thing that was done. I think in that case, it might be a mistake to build a team, but in the other type of situation where it's a new division or a new product that's going to be long-lived, we've been a part of seeding a new in-house team, and it's worked both ways for us, where we come on as consultants and help them hire their first employee full-time, and that usually works out great because they have someone in-house who's echoing all the things we're saying, and it increases the trust in their relationship. We've also had it go the other way, where someone hires their first tech person as the CTO or the tech lead or something like that, and then we're brought on to help them go faster and interview and hire and sort of build the team that way. I've seen both work, and I think it really just depends on, like Chris said, everyone's comfort levels and type of organization and everything like that.
I mean, your question was when corporations should go the insourcing route, right? Too.
Either
And-
way, or the pros and cons of it.
Well, I mean, if I was Urban Outfitters, I think it's a great idea. I mean, like, first off, incredible compound, right? So you have the ability to recruit some of the best talent in the area. If you have the ability to build the product at that level and you can have that level of innovation, I would say, yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. I mean, you're going to save a lot of money. The question I would have is there stagnation that happens in that sort of an environment if, you know, I don't know if there's, and I'm not too familiar with how you're going to talk about it in a minute, so I'd be kind of curious to hear more about it. But for companies that have the ability to recruit, I think it's awesome. And, you know, I'm sure there's opportunities where they can find the right moments to sort of outsource and find those sort of specialties that they don't have, as you guys were talking about too. If you're a culture that isn't the type of place that somebody would necessarily want to come work at immediately, then I don't think insourcing is the way to go. It really sort of depends on sort of the project. Now, if you also have a mission or values like a CHOP and that you can align to and you can attract those type of people, that's great. So I think there is a mixture depending on the project. But I would say a lot of agencies have been worried about it for a long time coming, and you see a lot of like bigger companies sort of buy up agencies and just bring them in-house and just kind of create their own, sort of augment a team overnight, which can sort of erode a culture of it. If an agency has a really great culture and all of a sudden they're bought by, you know, a really corporate environment, you can also make a really bad investment because those people are going to flee. So it really depends on, you know, I think the situation. But overall, I think it makes sense for companies like Urban. And Comcast right now is an interesting one too because they're building an entire tower and they're going to try to compete with the Googles of the world. So it's interesting to see, like, are they too big to innovate? You know, like I'm really curious to see what happens with Comcast when they bring those people in. It's either when people think about this area, Philadelphia in general, and I've talked to people all around the country, and when they're looking to move here or possibly get into the technology space, they think Urban and they think Comcast. There's a bunch of other agencies and things that are spawning up around the area, but they're the two big ones. So I think it's good for the area, honestly, from recruitment perspective, because I think Philly in general is really sort of an up and coming. I tend to lean, again, I'm less agency and I'm more into the startup space. So, you know, there's a lot happening right now as far as like how many startups and things are starting to spawn off. There's talk of a startup super center happening in Philadelphia that's going to have about 200 startups in it. There's, you know, incubators and accelerators and things. Like the accelerator model is kind of shifting a bit as well. One thing I didn't touch on earlier too is like even like Target just partnered with Techstars. So they're basically creating accelerator programs for companies to come in and sort of innovate for them, which I thought was a smart way. It's not necessarily insourcing, but it's a way to get sort of a level of innovation and kind of seeing problems from a different perspective. So,
Great. Okay. So one of my favorite CEOs of all time, Ed Catmull, over at Pixar, he coined the idea of the hungry beast and the ugly baby to explain sort of the difficulty and the necessity of supporting and protecting these fragile, ugly new ideas in the face of sort of the corporate machine, the bottom line. It's really difficult to put a lot of resources into something that you're unsure of yet, right? That ugly duckling. How do you guys kind of support and protect the ugly baby in your own businesses?
Is that a way of just saying, like, making sure you don't over-invest in the wrong thing?
So the idea is that when a new idea or technology or something comes to light, it's usually not the prettiest thing. It's not perfectly optimized. You can't immediately see how you're going to make millions of dollars off of it. So the bottom line makes you want to kind of crush that and move on to something else. But if we did that to all great new ideas, we would never have any innovation. So it's keeping those new ideas protected and alive for long enough to figure out how they fit in the face of, you know, payroll coming up and all of these things.
I'm going to use the metaphor of being on fire with something. There was a great blog post by a guy. He had a funny name. It's something Grimlock. His gimmick was to like write like Grimlock spoke from Transformers, so everything was really terrible English. And it was Be on Fire, I think, was the name of the blog post. And I think our experience has been that if someone really likes an idea, the first time there's an actual fire with something else, you know, you drop that, put the fire out, and sometimes forget about it. I think it seems to me like someone has to be on fire with the idea, so that when the other fire comes up, you know, they're still on fire with the idea at the end of the day, and they keep moving with it. That's been my experience, is that internal things that we're trying to innovate with, whether it's a product or something for us, or even just a new technology to experiment with that we might try to sell someday, somebody has to really be on fire with the goodness of the idea, so that they keep pushing it forward till it gets to a point where it's not just an ugly baby.
And everyone else also in the organization has to like kind of respect that fire, or like understand that at times it's going to seem like it's forced, or at times it's going to seem like it's not smart, but you have that long-term goal in mind. And it honestly really is just a huge challenge. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of like an internal tool or something we might make where as soon as client projects come in, they're much more important just because they have money. And it's really like, it's never going to work unless someone or maybe even someone at the top, I don't know exactly the formula, but someone has to force it through. Someone has to champion it even when it's really hard to champion.
I mean, aren't all new business ideas ugly babies when they start ultimately, right? So, I mean, the goal is to kind of figure out how to get it to that next level and as cheaply and as fast as you possibly can. So that, to me, would be, obviously, you got to have people that want to champion the idea, but if you can't validate or invalidate that hypothesis, that business idea, you get that sort of pivot or persevere kind of a moment. And, you know, are we going to keep following through with this, or do we kind of, you don't want to ditch your baby, you know what I mean? I guess in some ways, but in some ways you kind of have to do that, right, and kind of move on to the next one, and not sort of cling too much to it. But if you start to get the traction with it, and you can kind of move forward and you can sort of validate that business idea, then, you know, that's when you start kind of doubling down on those things. That would be my take on it.
Great. I think I should probably wrap this up here. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.